Good afternoon and welcome to St. James United Methodist Church. We are pleased to have you join us today for a celebratory concert honoring the 65th wedding anniversary of Alice and Bob Pfeiffer. This is being sponsored today, the concert and reception, by their sons, Kevin and John. Our guest artist today is Andrew Reisinger. Andrew is the Organist Associate Director of Music at the West End United Methodist Church in Nashville. He is also on the adjunct music faculty at Belmont University. You can read more details about him on the back of your program. And now, let us welcome Andrew Reisinger.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have known Andrew Reisinger for 30 years, and I only found out on Thursday evening that back in the 80s in college, Andrew had a summer job in the music ministry at the Alamo Heights United Methodist Church in San Antonio, Texas. And it happens to be that it was at the Alamo Heights Methodist Church in San Antonio, Texas, the very same place, on November 21st, 1959, that our parents got married. So it truly is a small world. November 21st has dual significance to our family because on November 21st, 1965, my favorite old man was born. And so in addition to celebrating our parents' anniversary, I get to say happy birthday a little bit early to my favorite old man. Kevin, happy birthday. Our introduction of Andrew's next piece provides an opportunity for Kevin and me to say our words of welcome. We are, of course, so glad that you have all chosen to be with us today to honor our parents, Alice and Bob, and celebrate the gift of music. The space we are in became the main place of worship here at St. James United Methodist Church in the early 80s. I think 1982. Anybody confirm that? Something like it, close to that. With Kevin and me serving as the inaugural balcony ushers for the 1045 service. Later that fall, this organ was dedicated by the renowned, in a hymn service, by the renowned American organist and composer Paul Mons, whose hymns, anthems, and chorales were a cornerstone of our church's musical life. And I would like to ask a show of hands if you are here for that service. I know a few of you were.
The music ministry here at St. James is one of the biggest reasons our family joined and became so active in St. James. For John and me, as well as so many others, Martha Lynn and Felix Thompson had an impact and influence on our lives as great as our parents did. The love of music that they instilled in us directly connects us from the day we joined the church in 1977 to today. We know that Felix is looking down on us with happiness, and while Martha Lynn could not physically be present, she is watching us on the live stream. Mrs. Thompson, we thank you, and Mr. Thompson, for changing our lives. Martha Lynn is also a renowned composer of handbell music, and we grew up ringing her settings in many of Paul Mons's works.
The next piece on the program today is one of my favorites of those works by Mons, and I want to thank Andrew for including it on the program today. We are truly thankful. And so Mons' setting of Now Thank We All Our God, a melody dating back to 1647, is a fitting choice. Thank you all.
Good afternoon. I'm Mary Wilgen, honored to be called a friend of the Pfeiffers, and I want you to join me in giving thanks more to God. Lord God, we thank you for Alice and Bob and for all the years they've had together. You've blessed them with grace, forgiveness, and love. We celebrate their 65 years together, and we pray for your continued blessings. Amen.
Good afternoon. It is a real pleasure to be here to celebrate this particular occasion. I've known about St. James United Methodist Church for a long time through my friend John Pfeiffer. And when he asked me to be part of this celebration today, I couldn't say no, because you can't say no to John. But actually, no, I really was very happy to be asked. And John had big ideas about this program. So most of the things that he specifically requested are actually on the program, and the last piece that you just heard was one of them. And I was glad to comply with most of these requests too, because they're splendid pieces of music. That Toccata by Gigoux is quite the fireball in B minor, so I'm going to let the flames cool for a second before we hit this next piece, because it says the title of the next piece is Finale, but it's really a toccata in sheep's clothing. So you will hear this moving pattern in the hands that is quite relentless, but there is a very tuneful theme that the feet play. And even if you don't know this piece yet, by the time it's over, you'll probably be humming the tune, and you hear it stated many, many times. But the composer Louis Vierne, he was organist at Notre Dame Cathedral, and you know, we're a month away from them reopening. I think it's Christmas Eve. I had heard this from one of their organists not too long ago, so that's exciting news for them. But he was famous for his post at Notre Dame Cathedral. He composed many symphonies for the organ, 6 in total, but they're all multi-movement works. And from the first symphony, this Finale is probably one of his most well-known tunes. And Vierne had a very difficult life. I mean, he was blind for one thing, and had just many other sorrows throughout his life. But you'll hear that the music he composed just completely belies that reality, because this is truly one of the most joyous pieces. When I suggested including this in the program, I just partly thought it was a very celebratory piece, so that's one of the reasons I wanted to include it today. Okay, so despite all of these loud, fast, toccata-like pieces, we're actually going to have just a couple of quiet moments in the program for good measure. The next piece is out of Elgar's variations known as the Enigma. And of all of the movements in that work for orchestra, the movement Nimrod is probably the best known. And he just takes this very delicate but soulful theme and just develops it over the course of several minutes. And the organ actually translates this piece pretty well, but it is one of the more beautiful English orchestral works that you can hear. Following that, we will go to the Scherzo of Vidor. This piece, the same composer as Vidor, of the last piece on the program, and this is from one of his other symphonies for the organ. The Fourth Symphony is really not a particularly well-known work. One of my organ teachers used to say, if you're not familiar with it, it was composed after the Third and before the Fifth Symphonies. And so this scherzo, though it's very sprightly, and it's one of those examples of how a piece that's in a minor key can still sound kind of happy, actually. It uses the very soft flutes of the organ. So after that, I'll give you another note or two, but Elgar and then Vidor. Okay, quiet time is over. The Joyful Joyful by Diane Bish is something that I have been familiar with since I was a teenager, and that was a really long time ago. I got to know this piece when I was first really getting interested in the organ because I would see Miss Bish perform on TV, and I collected some of her records and some of her scores. And then many years later, when I was working in my current job, I realized that we had a transcription of that piece for handbells. And so we have heard that piece played at West End United Methodist Church in Nashville, and John was playing it at the time. And then later I realized the connection between him and Martha Lynn Thompson from right here, and all of these published works that are transcriptions of various pieces, but that one does especially make a splendid bell piece. And so it's fun to include some things in this program that are connected to John's experience both here and in playing handbells, and Kevin's too, yes, exactly. So we will hear Joyful, 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 We Adore Thee, and then move on to a little bit of Bach after that. So we have to include Bach in a organ recital. At least that's my feeling about it. So the fugue in G minor I'm about to play was one of the requests from John, and something that I actually love to play. The thing is, Bach composed a number of fugues in G minor, but this one is often called the little fugue in G minor as opposed to the great fugue, which is part of the Fantasian fugue in G minor. However, this piece is not little as a piece of music. It is just, I think, one of the most exquisite works Bach ever penned, and I think it's simply because the relationship of these four voices is near perfect. A fugue, just for anyone that may not be aware, is a composition in which the voices enter one at a time, and you'll hear the main theme stated. It's a rather lengthy theme, but then the next voice enters, very same theme, and then the third, and then the fourth. And so we just keep layering in these different voices until we have this web of four voices in counterpoint, but the relationship and the way you hear them interact is, I think, what is so nearly perfect in Bach's fugue in G minor. Following that, we'll have the toccata in D minor, not the Phantom of the Opera toccata, but a different one. And this one is one of the few examples where Bach, he did not give registration indications, but he did indicate to use two different manuals, and that's really quite unusual in his compositions. So there are markings where you're supposed to move from one manual to a different one so that you're hearing choruses in dialogue with each other. And then following that, we'll have the air from the Suite in D, which is commonly known as the air on the G string, and something that is played on the violin orchestrally, and again, it's just something that I think translates really beautifully to the organ, and that will give us just another few minutes of quiet before we wrap up the program. This has been such a pleasure. You've been a wonderful audience. I will just say a little bit about the next two pieces, and I think there's something else to be shared with you between the last two pieces. The Lotus by Billy Strayhorn is maybe not as familiar as some other jazz tunes. I love hearing jazz on the organ. I don't do it by trade. I don't just do it spontaneously, but this is a published work. But it has an interesting history. This tune by Billy Strayhorn was improvised on by Alec Whiten, who was many years ago organist at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York City. And this was for the funeral of Duke Ellington. The sister of Duke Ellington requested specifically that Alec Whiten improvised on this particular tune during the communion of the funeral service. And so he did, and later that recording was transcribed to be this published work that we can now actually sit down and play. And so, as just something a little bit different in the mix this afternoon, I wanted to include Lotus. To my knowledge, it's just an instrumental tune. I don't think it has lyrics, but I find it very touching and very sweet, with a little bit of melancholy. And the solo voice that you'll hear is a stop on the organ called the crumb horn, but I'm using a flute with it to create a little bit of a clarinet sound. Then the very last piece on the program is something that was a specific request. It's something that I know this church hears on festive occasions, and I've certainly played a lot at my church also, especially on Easter, but Vidor's Toccata is, there were a few other pieces written for the organ as splendid, and so I was happy to add that request to the program today. So Lotus and then Vidor. Thank you.
I'd like to invite everybody to a reception following our program tonight to meet Andrew and say hello to Bob and Alice. It's in the St. James Welcome Center, which is back through the sanctuary and to your left, so we hope you'll all stop by. I also want to thank you for being here today. We couldn't do something like this without a great audience. And I want to thank the pastors and staff here at St. James for making this happen. Every crazy little thing we needed has been accommodated, and here we are. But most especially, I have to thank you, Robert Lindley. I approached Robert about a year ago, and all of the hundreds of things that have to be done for something like this to come together were done, and it's just been a pleasure working with you, Robert, and I thank you very much for your personal commitment to making this happen. Mom and Dad, thank you for staying together for 65 years. And many people understand this here, for finding a place like this for Kevin and me to grow up in. And Andrew, all these stops popping out at just the right time and buttons and manuals and stuff, it doesn't come that way, folks. And Andrew had never laid eyes on this organ until Friday morning, and so in that time he's done all the programming to get this organ set up to make these pieces play the way he wanted them to. So Andrew, thank you for coming all this way and for doing this for us. And I'll wrap the... And so as a St. James ringer, I have to say a few things about this last piece. I'll keep it quick. But my mother calls this the national anthem of St. James, and she's probably not the only person who calls it that. But Mother said Friday night, or maybe last night, that she was awestruck the first time she heard this piece of music. And you have to keep in mind that the first time that our family heard this piece of music was probably at Christmas in 1977, and it was when we were worshiping in the old sanctuary over there that had I think about a 4-rank unit organ that is just a fraction of what this is. That kind of speaks to the power of this piece, that even on an instrument that's nothing like what we have here today, it still was such an inspiring piece. And so as you hear this, know that we rang this on handbells also. Raise your hand if you've rung this on handbell. And so Michelle, tell your sister for me. She's probably watching, but I offered to turn the pages for this, but he didn't think that would be a very good idea. And if you were a St. James ringer in 1986, you know what I'm talking about. So thank you all very much. The Toccata from Symphony 5 by Charles Marie Widor.